Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 46. As always, I'm going to start us off with a bit of a tune. Okay, that was Holyrood, which is the quick march of the RAF regiment, who are responsible for the defence of RAF airfields and so on. Actually, know a chap who's serving in the RAF regiment at the moment. He just did 6 months in Cyprus earlier in the year. Okay, and that was from the excellent channel Patriotic Archive, by the way. Okay, so let's get into this. And I'd like to introduce the guests I've got at the moment. We may or may not get one or two others later on, we'll see. And we'll start off with Napoleon, or David Attenfarter, as he is known today. How are you going?
Hello. Just one thing before we go any further. Because I know that my mic can be quite loud on Steams, and I didn't know until someone told me. So can you just tell me if this is like lower?
Seems fine to me. Seems fine to me. If anyone in the chat's got a problem, just say.
Great.
Yeah, did you have anything you wanted to bring up as a first topic there, Napoleon?
Well, I saw something on Twitter on the Politics for All page, and it's newspapers have been they've been reporting that things like gay conversion therapy won't be banned, and other stuff, that charities that kind of offer advice to children about gender dysphoria could be outlawed, removed, stuff like that. Which when I woke up to that, I was it kind of made my day a bit, but I don't think that the legislation's been brought out yet, so I guess we have to wait for that. I think it's just the newspapers blowing stuff up, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, I'd like them to ban them doing any sort of nonsense to children, frankly. But you know, we'll see if that really happens. I dare say. Was that your first point then, Napoleon?
Oh, the second one.
Yep.
My second point is that the Queen has been ordered to rest for 2 weeks, and what preceded that, before that rest for 2 weeks, was I think another thing where the Queen was supposed to go. She went into hospital, then she went out, and now this has happened, which is making me think that the Queen's on the slope to pretty much to her death. I think this is the kind of I think it's just going to be a dominoes downwards, and that's going to put me in a mood. And my third point is that Aussie, yes, I can see that you're doing that, and I am on my way to retaliate immediately. So.
Yeah, guys, let's not get too childish, please. Our two Scottish guys having this stuff going on in the chain. Okay, moving on to Aussie. Aussie, how are you going?
I'm not too bad. Pretty average week for me. The main thing that's been going on for me of recent has been my quite famous, on Discord at the very least, 180 on my opinion on COVID. Almost embarrassingly quick. And I'm sure we'll get into that later, but that's down to a very interesting video, which will probably not be allowed on YouTube.
That's the one from what's his name?
Ryan. Alt Hype is he?
Yeah, Alt Hype. Yeah. I put that on our Discord because it is a very good video.
Yeah.
So did you have any other subject you wanted to bring up as a starter?
Anything else of immense import? I mean, you brought up how they're going to start. There's legislation to potentially limit drag hunting, and
what it was that the members of the National Trust have voted to ban drag hunting, which I think is ridiculous. I mean, you know, drag hunting is they're just chasing a scent; they're not killing anything. So I don't understand why the members of the National Trust care about that at all.
I have one hypothesis. When you go riding with a big group and you're searching for something, a horse is a very big and heavy beast, and they can cause quite a lot of footpath erosion. I mean, the problem, and so I suspect that's probably their reason. The only problem with that, for those who don't know, drag hunting is basically when you're not even catching anything. It's almost practice, because you're basically teaching your dogs and your team to follow scents. And people sometimes use it to also learn how to stalk and things like that. But by the way, Dave, I will link it in a second. I do believe I have a special spanner now, so I can do so. So the limiting of that will probably quite hurt the countryside economy even more. I also know that there's quite a lot of people now who want to ban bird shooting, which is, for posh pricks like me, a favorite activity. And all bunch of goodies down the line for people who dare to not want to live in the city.
Well, it's like, to me, I mean, I was not particularly a big fan of fox hunting, I have to say. But to me, drag hunting is just, you know, it's a way of keeping traditions going, you know. And you know, hunters and hounds in the country, in the British countryside, is a British tradition.
Yeah.
So and you know, if you ban it, what that just means that there'll be less horses and there'll be less foxhounds around as well, and I don't think that's a good thing.
No. Yeah, I mean, horses in particular are just.
And it's going to obviously it's going to obviously chuck people out of work. There's going to be people who lose their jobs over that.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I find horses such a delight. And so.
Yeah, I love horses and I like riding. Yeah. I mean, I don't do it as much as I'd like to, but I have ridden quite a lot in the past.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. I think horses are beautiful animals.
Yeah. Did the National Trust actually give a reason themselves for banning it?
Well, they haven't banned it. What it is, Rupert, is the membership has voted to ban it, but it's a non-binding vote. So now the people who actually run the National Trust have got to decide what they're going to do.
Well, yeah. So if they do, in the absence of any given reason, then I would assume that it's just attacking the countryside wealthy.
Yeah, it's having a go at the toffs and also the traditions, and yeah. I'm not in favour of either of those things particularly, but there we go. But it's going to throw a lot of ordinary people in the country out of work as well. You know, there's people who look after the hounds, there's people who look after the stables and the horses. You know.
Well, we might end up seeing that the getting rid of fox hunting in the first place was kind of the thin end of the wedge, as it so often is.
Yeah. I mean, it was like when they banned smoking in pubs. That was the first stage to the lockdowns, really. As soon as you let the government start telling you what to do in places which are not run by the government, then you're on a slippery slope, in my opinion. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about, Ozzy? To start with,
it's been a pretty stale week, to be honest. I guess the other main thing you could talk about is how cheeky the French are, and
I think we will touch on that in a bit. But I mean, the French are really quite foolish because apparently people have spontaneously been boycotting French goods, and it's costing the French quite a lot of money already. So the one thing that will unite the British is the French doing something stupid. So
I mean, to my knowledge, I think as long as the British stick to their guns, and basically don't budge, we've got this one because it's the French who are doing this, and
they illegally held a British trawler, didn't they?
Yeah, so it's So this will almost entirely reflect bad on the French. And also, I really hope that the government does this, because if Macron backs down, it will be a complete humiliation for him, like barely 6 months before the election season of France.
I was just thinking about how that would affect the French domestic politics, because they're in a little bit of trouble in various fields.
That's basically what it's all about.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, Ozzy.
Yeah, I mean, Macron is now known to be a bit of a flip-flopper, especially after his gas taxes, and the general strength of the French countryside and French nationalism. So to see him basically hit his face against the wall, which hopefully he will do, given this fishing incident, would be quite the delight. But
some of the stuff that's talked about openly on in French media, and some of the rumblings that were coming out previously about the idea of either a coup of some kind, like that hasn't gone away, and so it's kind of hard to tell how many different dynamics are making them. So especially from the Anglophone perspective, it's hard to know how many dynamics internally are making them act seemingly irrationally or aggressively or whatever to try and stabilize the internal politics.
It's such a funny situation with France, because like, of all the countries in Northwestern Europe, they are possibly the most non-Northwestern Europe. The fact that you can be threatened with coup d'états and like go on and like have a president speak about anti-Islam, albeit from a secular perspective, it's bizarre. But so in many ways, I can only hope that they get a president like Le Pen, which is even more anti-Western, how might we say, status quo. At
this point, there are now other figures who are sort of floating around floating around in the political sphere that may be just as plausible, albeit not necessarily from the most electoral of routes.
Savoury of routes, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I saw there's another right-wing chap, isn't there, who's apparently even more popular than Le Pen.
Yes,
that's not
Zemmour,
true.
is
He's not more popular than Le Pen. So the last poll, Le Pen was like something like 22%, and I think it's Brombert or something like that. He's like 15%.
Zemmour, you mean?
Yeah, Zemmour. Yeah, I
Journalist.
can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember the names. They're
And
French.
is there some way that he and Le Pen could kind of work together?
The thing is about the French elections is that no matter what, it's that one of them will get the votes anyway, because the way it works is it works in 2 rounds. You basically get the 2 top people with the most votes, so that will probably be Macron on the left, and it will be either Le Pen or the other guy, Mr. Baguette or whatever. Then whichever one of them will succeed will then run in the second round. And the idea for the second round would be that basically everyone on the right wing would unite and everyone on the left wing would unite. And then it's just really a question of who has the numbers.
Yeah.
Well, that dynamic does also rely on the supporters of people like Mélenchon and the crypto commies or actual commies voting for more free market capitalism in the form of someone like Le Pen, which there's always a little bit of a question mark over whether or not they'd rather go for that or whether they'd rather go for a more a right-wing version of the economics that they actually want.
I mean, knowing how the left behaves, and thinking back particularly to America in 2016 and 2020, I remember those big sort of Bernie or bust, Bernie or bust, Bernie or bust. And then when it still push came to shove, like people like the Young Turks were basically like, yeah, sure, Democrats are corrupt as shit and all that, blah, blah, blah. Vote Hillary Clinton.
I did notice, just while you're talking about the Americans, I did notice that senile Joe Biden has been cozying up to Macron lately as well. I mean, this week, in fact.
Well, they have almost exactly the same politics.
Well, yeah, they're big time globalists for sure. Yeah.
Well, it's neoliberalism. I mean, the only thing I would say is that Macron is probably slightly more pro-business than Biden. That's about it.
Yeah. Could I just say to Napoleon and also to you, Ozzy, could we quit with the silly signs? I'm quite happy to have a laugh on this show, but right. Rupert, well, I don't know actually whether he did, but I mean, you two are always doing this. You're not being. It's not a good advert for Scottish unity, is it, guys? Let's be fair.
No, but it's a great advert for Scottish banter.
I got no problem. I got no problem with banter, but don't write it on the screen because YouTube, being the free speech, non-supporting people that they are, might object to that. Rupert, anything you'd like to bring up as a first subject?
I've been getting a little bit more recently into the Arthurian mythos, so I think that's quite an interesting topic, especially in regards to how it is reintroduced back into the political scene. Albeit, I don't know how you do that now. If that was hypothetically something that was to happen, but it's kind of like interesting how the Tudors, in particular, brought it back as a means of sort of resurrecting the idea of a return of the of King Arthur is as a legitimization tool using the sort of king in the mountain or king under the mountain mythical archetype. So that's been quite interesting. I think
as far as I understand, like the basis in truth of it is like sometime just after the Romans left, is it not?
Yes, pretty much. Though, as part of some of the stories, Arthur himself does have he has to rebuke Roman legates, I think, or like some Roman officials who come to try and reimpose an authority of a sort.
Mango is saying he was Welsh.
Ah, well, I mean, the chauvinist Salopians would tell you that actually it's all in Shropshire, and I'm inclined to believe them as a proud Salopian myself.
Well, I mean, here's the issue. I mean, it comes from back in the days before the Saxon migration, so it would have been.
Well, he was fighting off the Saxons, so it was during that process.
So he would have been a Briton.
Yeah.
So Welsh is probably actually his closest ancestry.
Romano-Briton, but there was a pretty significant extent to which the Britons were absorbed into the Anglo-Saxon society and culture to an extent.
Well,
but,
yeah,
obviously they were still there as a particularly genetically distinct entity.
Yeah, I mean, on the genetic profile, I would actually say it's probably more likely the Anglo-Saxons were absorbed into Brittonic. But I mean, like, if you want to say that like there is a pure native people to the British Isles, then it's probably going to be the Welsh.
The Welsh got invaded by Ireland at some point though, and start getting a load of cultural influence from there, I believe.
I think South Wales possibly, but I'm not so sure that's entirely true in places like the northern parts of which I can't spell. I can't say their names.
I shall tell you what, I saw a very interesting take about a year ago. It was an article that I read which claimed that King Arthur was actually from what we would call nowadays Scotland, and that he was actually a prince and died at the Abbey of Iona. But the funniest thing about that is that the evidence for it was very interesting, and apparently this guy is now going all around Scotland, and he's still doing it to this date, doing a lot of archaeology to prove that King Arthur was from Scotland.
You're actually all wrong. King Arthur is actually was actually a whitewashed name. Yeah, he's actually called King the Boo, and he's from Congo.
He was an early immigrant. Eh?
No. He wasn't an immigrant. We're the immigrants.
He was Irish.
Nope. No, Nappy.
Well, I've certainly seen him claimed by the Cornish, and I've seen him claimed by the Welsh for sure. And apparently, now we've got Rupert saying that he might be from Shropshire. So,
but
Arthur's seat is indeed in Scotland, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's near Edinburgh.
But it's got nothing to do with King Arthur, I'm pretty sure.
No, it's I don't think it has anything at all to do with it. It's just I don't know the exact reason for its nomenclature, but I think I wouldn't think it's to do with King Arthur.
I think it's just a series of Munros, I think.
It's a series of Munros just south of Edinburgh. Well, I mean, it's one of a series of Munros. I used to run there when I was at school.
Ozzy, I know you're interested in genetics and this kind of stuff, and I think Joe's correct in what he's saying here. The genetic map of Britain shows that there's not really been enormous changes for several thousand years in the UK, really.
Yeah, so it's a bit more complicated than that because it depends where you are. And also an important thing to understand is that genetics can be stable in like how you look, but also underneath you can just have some funny little things which are just changing. It's an inherently stochastic thing, but I would say that as a general rule, if you are a British person and your ancestry says that you have, you're 100% British or something like that, you probably have about 60% in like going back to 60% at a minimum of your genetics going back all the way to your some of the original settlers of these islands, Celtics or Gallics, or and I mean Gallic in terms of Gauls.
Yeah.
But
that's more of a cultural descriptor in itself, isn't it? I thought that, a lot of the.
It is sort of, but the thing is that you get the genetic profile. The genetic profile of these multiple Celts, they actually share 1 or 2 Y chromosomes between them, which generally shows root inheritance. But just going quickly from 2008 to 0 AD, the Romans had very, very little genetic impact.
No, very little indeed. Yeah,
Barely any at all. The Anglo-Saxons had a bit, much more pronounced on the East Coast than the West Coast. The Nords had a surprisingly small impact. The average person has between 2 to 5% Scandinavian DNA. I myself have 7%, I think.
Yeah.
Speculatively, though, I wonder if some of this has to do with, so especially on the Roman side, because the Romans were congregating in a lot of the cities, that just because of the decline of cities at various points, and just the fact that there's a pretty nasty turnover in population for cities when they're relying on immigration just to stay at a stable population level up until like the
but
also
mid-19th
century.
A lot of the Romans in the UK were like military and so on.
Yes.
And how much did they actually interbreed with the local population? Probably not that much to some degree.
Roman Britain was not a very popular province.
Yeah. Yeah, a bit cold and wet for the average Roman.
Yeah,
it was very popular if you were a governor who had aspirations for higher things.
Yeah, yes, because it was a very military province, and there were normally a few legions that were kept in Britain at any given point. But one of the big things about the conquest of Britain was basically to help fulfill the quota of promising a legionary after 25 years' service his plot of land. And so now you're given like a few rocky cairns in Wales. Great.
Guard the border, boyo.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing in that situation quite similar to the experience of trying to do that for English soldiers in Ireland. I think that's happened at least twice, where they find that they can't actually do anything with it that they want to do it, so they just sell it and move back to England or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you might know this, Rupert. I believe that, like, for example, the guys who built Stonehenge, not long after it was finished, were actually replaced by the Belbeaker culture, I think it was, that was coming from Europe.
I believe so. I don't remember specifically who it was, but yeah, they were replaced quite soon after.
And like that's that's kind of like the root British culture that most people still have quite a lot of DNA from. I think that's right. Is it not, Ozzy?
So Belbeakers, I mean, a bit. Thing is that European migration really has just not had a huge influence. People like to point to the Huguenots as like an example of recent migration into Britain, but in terms of the genetic profile of the UK as a whole, it's just, the influence it's had has been negligible.
But they were also like Northwest European people anyway.
Yes, but there's still important differences. This is something that actually the Wignats get wrong. They seem to think that the genetic differences just sort of become meaningless after you've gotten to like a continental level. It's just really, really not the case. In fact, in the UK itself, there's a few great papers that were done. One as early as 2003, which basically found that people living in individual towns, like mapping from places from Pitlochry to St Ives, they had small but significant differences, and by significant I mean highly unlikely to be down to chance. People are there is a constant variation across the UK, also the other important thing, of course, to note about that variation is tiny in comparison to our closest continental relations, which would be the Germans. So, yeah. Anyway, I ramble.
The Anglo-Saxons are basically a Germanic people for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, the overlooked tribe, the Jutes,
Yeah.
which probably hailed from somewhere around Jutland.
Yeah, I was going to say Juteland. It's a pretty good indicator.
Yeah. We barely know anything about them, and they are probably, and they had the least influence. But the Angles and the Saxons, I mean, the Saxons hailed from Saxony there, and the Angles probably
More
were,
Frisian, I think.
yeah,
right.
Yeah, yeah, they were likely between either they were either parts of northern Germany or somewhere between the Netherlands, like somewhere a bit like Oldenburg or Bremen. But yeah.
Well, I know the strange thing is that Jutland, the island, was actually British until the 1890s, at which stage Britain swapped it for Zanzibar, I do believe. Which in the First World War, I think the Admiralty must have been cursing, but there we go.
Yeah, I've been to Zanzibar, to be fair. It's quite nice. It's a nice
Yeah. No, it's nice and exotic and what have you. But I mean, in the First World War, the Admiralty would have really liked to have had a heavily fortified Jutland. It wouldn't have done the German Navy any favours at all.
Well, I mean, the German Navy was stymied throughout that war anyway, so it doesn't really
I mean, it was stuffed. It was never going to do anything. It was a luxury fleet that did nothing but cost the Germans a huge amount of money. But yeah, absolutely true. Anyway, Rupert, you started us with this subject. I wondered if you were going to take it into a particular place at all.
Well,
actually, Jack Holloway. Sorry, absolutely, Jack Holloway. You're right. I mean Heligoland, not Jutland. You're quite correct. Thank you very much, Jack Holloway.
Yes, I believe Jutland is the continental part of.
It's a peninsula, isn't it?
Yes,
Heligoland is the island. Yes.
Yeah, the Jutland Peninsula.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you very much, Jack Holloway. Sorry, Rupert. You were taking this in some direction, I believe.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So I'm reminded of the experience of the Greeks in the very early 20th century, because there's kind of like an air reading about them of almost like the fulfillment of prophecy and providence when they're making all of their gains, their continental gains, and throwing the Turks out of Europe in the First Balkan War, more or less, under a king called Constantine, who was I think he was nicknamed Constantine the 12th, or that's how he was referred to in official documentation, and so. Because there's so much mythology around the restoration of Constantinople and Byzantium, it kind of had to have felt like, like the Greeks were like a providential people who were just on the cusp of exploding back onto the world stage and regaining all of their lost greatness and everything at that time, and it sort of seemed to be happening. So I can't help but wonder about trying to tap into something similar, considering we have some of our own mythical foundation for that to be. Well, built up and established, in terms of the Arthurian legend and the return of King Arthur, once and future king, and all that.
No one look up what happened to the Greeks.
Yes, exactly.
But
that story doesn't end well, but
yeah,
but there was a moment.
I have to agree that legends are extremely important to a nation. They certainly are. I mean, if you look at Scotland, I mean. For example, we got two Scots on the panel this evening. So, obviously, Robert the Bruce and the legend of him being in that cave and watching the spider and all this, which I very much doubt was actually true, but it's quite an important legend.
That's the point, actually. Does any of that sort of stuff come up with Scottish independence at all? Scottish nationalism? I haven't heard anything about that, but maybe
Robert the Bruce and the story of the spider.
Yeah.
No, not once have I ever heard that in my life, because it's just not true. But we don't know, like, if it's false or just true.
I'm sure I was told that story at primary school in England.
Yeah, to me, it's entirely plausible because he did actually hide in a cave, but whether or not he saw a spider is entirely up to I don't know, just history that we can't reach into.
It's a bit like Alfred the Great and burning the cakes. You know, I mean, we know Alfred the Great did spend some time in a swamp, in a muddy area to escape the Danes while he was regrouping. But whether he actually burnt any cakes, that's probably a different story. You know, but legends like that are certainly, I think, quite important.
Yeah, yeah. I was about to say Charles II who hid in a tree, but then I remembered that that's actually true.
Yeah, that one I think did happen. Yeah, he actually did hide in an oak tree from the parliamentarians. But I did the Robert the Bruce thing with the spider trying to make his web, and Alfred with his burning the cakes. They strike me as quite similar sorts of legends, you know.
Also, who's this homosexual in the chat? Scottish nationalism is a joke. Fuck off. It's not. It's actually,
no.
You know,
I think he means the SNP, Napoleon.
Yeah, unfortunately, the nomenclature was rather completely botched when it came to Scottish nationalism, because what is actually more appropriately called is Scottish separatism, which is, I agree, is the joke. It's not very smart or really going anywhere, but Scottish nationalism. Yeah, I mean, Nicola Sturgeon did a thing a few years ago in which he basically said, if I could change the name of my party, I would.
Lesbian.
What
would? Yeah,
lesbian. We like immigrants party.
Yeah, and
did she actually mention what she would change it to?
No, she was just like, yeah. I don't like to conjecture about what the country, like, I don't like the idea that this party was based on a history of nationalism and xenophobia, which of course it was, but hey-ho, anti-Irish xenophobia, no less. But
I mean, the funny thing.
I'll be changing my vote.
The funny thing is, and Ozzy and Napoleon will tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the very early Scottish nationalists were a little bit fascistic, were they not?
Yes, they were, and there's some of and there's still some of them today called Tartan Tories.
It depends how far back you would like to go, and my knife just hit the plate, and that was fucking loud, and I'm sorry if you heard that.
We did hear it, but it doesn't matter.
Ah, well.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing that changed the SNP in its mission, because it was basically a nowhere party before Margaret Thatcher, and then Margaret Thatcher sort of came in, completely built up resentment for Scots to English people. And
I remember how. I mean, I lived in Scotland for a while when she was in power. And in Stirling, no less, and Stirling is like, well, I don't know about now, but when I lived there, it was probably a pretty conservative area in most respects. But she was hated in Scotland big time. She really was.
Yeah, and I don't think the Scots will ever forgive the Tories for the poll tax. We will probably 200 years from now still be talking about the legend of this evil woman trying to stick poles all over Scotland or something like that. Yeah, and that's really unfortunate. It's part of the reason I'm not a huge fan of Thatcher.
Look, and I think she made mistakes. I mean, I voted for her twice, but I think she made mistakes for sure, and the poll tax was one of them. But she made other mistakes. Like it was far too late when she realised the direction that the European community was going in. She should have realised that long before she did, and by the time she did realise it, John Major was standing in the background with a knife about to do a Brutus on her. So yeah, and I mean that didn't go well for the Conservative Party in the long run, did it?
Yeah.
But I mean, I also think she made mistakes in the sense of like when she denationalized industries, she didn't set them up so there was actual competition and this kind of things. Those were mistakes. She did the Falklands War, and she's probably the only British Prime Minister since World War II who would have done it. So for that, I'll give her some kudos.
We're selling Anthony Eden a little bit short there, but
I'm not a big Eden fan, Rupert. I've got to tell you, man. I think Eden was one of the worst British politicians. First of all, in the 1930s, it was mainly Eden when he was foreign minister who pushed Mussolini into the Austrian painter's arms over Abyssinia, which of course these days is Ethiopia, for no reason whatever, because the Italians taking over Abyssinia was no bad deal from Britain's point of view. The Italian and British colonists in East Africa got on quite fine, and it probably would have been a benefit to the Abyssinians overall eventually. I don't see any reason why Britain got so upset about that, and that was mainly Anthony Eden's doing. And then, of course, he did the Suez nonsense in 1956. And I first of all, he took too long doing it because they fired and fiddled around for so long. And then, as soon as the Americans threatened him even slightly, instead of telling the Americans, "Well, tough shit, if you want to bankrupt your main ally, then do it," which of course they would not have done, in my opinion. He completely folded. I think Eden was an idiot. I'm no fan of his at all.
I'm getting some deja vu. Actually, I feel like we've already had this conversation at one point
before.
But
we could well have, because Eden is one of my bugbears. I don't like him at all.
Well, the fact that he at least made some kind of play to maintain the empire rather than actively encouraging the dissolution of it or handing it to the Americans. That puts him in the better, handful of prime ministers that we've had since World War II, I would say.
I disagree, because as soon as the Americans put the slightest bit of pressure on him, he folded. Instead of turning around and saying, "Okay, do it then," because they wouldn't have done that. I mean, even Mrs. Thatcher was in a slightly similar situation during the Falklands War, because the Americans wanted to treat, because they were allies of the Argentinians as well, because they liked Gualtieri because he was anti-communist. Yeah. They tried to be even-handed about that, and Mrs. Thatcher, actually, to her credit, forced the Americans' hand. She actually turned around and said, "Look, you've got to decide who's your most important ally, Argentina or Britain." And obviously, when push comes to shove, they're always going to back Britain rather than Argentina. And I think Eden should have done exactly the same thing.
I had to double check, but I believe they did actually start crashing our economy. And that's
they did put some pressure on the pound, but it was nowhere near as bad as some people say it was. Nowhere near as bad. I mean, bear in mind the British economy in 1956 was not as bad as it was in 1971.
No, one of the better ones in in Europe still at that time, as I recall.
Yeah,
but still heavily reliant on sort of the external markets and America's good graces, unfortunately.
Yeah, but you've got to look at it this way. The only way America could have stopped Britain doing that, if Eden had turned around and said, "Well, tough shit, do your worst," is they would have literally had to have bankrupted their best ally in Europe and the world.
Well, whether or not they actually consider us their best ally is
whether that is actually it probably is true even today. If you look at things like Iraq and Afghanistan, stupid as they were, it was the British who had easily the second largest number of forces there in both cases, even today.
Oh well, no, we'll come and help them as a good lapdog, but they don't really have particularly warm feelings to us.
No, I don't think they do at all. But that's why I would have said to them, "Look, I mean, if you want to bankrupt your best ally in the world, well, go for it and see if you're going to do it." I don't think they would have done myself. I mean, bear in mind that there were four British divisions in Europe at that stage facing the Soviets. The Americans couldn't afford to lose those 4 divisions.
So I'm more tempted to think that they probably would have gone through with it just just
I
because
just-
at the governmental level they do act as an enemy more fundamentally.
Oh yeah, I think they do, but I think they do it subtly, and I don't think they would have. They could have afforded to crash Britain in those days. And Britain in 1956 was still a quite considerable military power, and had bases all over the bloody place, and a much bigger navy than we have today. Like, you know, a vastly bigger navy than we have today. The Royal Air Force was relatively much more powerful. The British Army was, I don't know, probably 6 times the size that it is today. So yeah, I don't know, man. I don't think the Americans, had push come to shove, would have done that. I think they would have. And don't forget, the French were involved, and Israel was involved. And you know, according to many people on the right today, America never does anything against Israel. So you know.
And the other thing worthy of note is that by this point, Britain had developed nuclear-capable technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, Britain did have the bomb by 1956. Yes, we did.
And I mean, mutually assured destruction hadn't quite come into fruition yet as a doctrine, but I mean, Nagasaki and Hiroshima was still fresh in people's minds, and no one really wanted to play with that sort of stuff.
And Korea was still pretty fresh in people's minds, and also in Korea, as so many other places, the second largest number of forces in Korea were British and Commonwealth forces. So, you know,
I mean,
there was a Commonwealth division in Korea made up of British, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand soldiers.
I mean, I'll definitely agree that Eden could have done the Suez Crisis better. Obviously, it was a bit of a catastrophe in the end. But if the issue is that he made the play and didn't commit to it hard enough, that's still better than not committing to it at all, or like Ali, actively encouraging America to step up and tear the empire apart.
Oh, listen, absolutely. I mean, America has had the biggest part to play in ending the British Empire. Well, if you don't count getting involved in World War One and then World War Two, but Judge Caligula Bushman says Duke is correct. Mussolini hated Hitler almost went to war with him over Austria. Entirely true, he did.
Yep,
and
I believe
Mussolini did not hate Britain at all.
No, he wanted to ally with Britain and France as his sort of first port of call, but felt himself sort of pushed into alliance with Germany.
But he wanted Egypt.
Well,
yes,
no, but he only wanted Egypt after the war started. He didn't want Egypt before the war.
I mean, there is that sort of Novo Imperium Romanum.
Yeah, but
doctrine.
But you, Ozzy, if you look at the history of this, and I've looked at it quite extensively, the main reason that Mussolini was pushed into the Axis camp was because of Abyssinia, and Britain, largely because of Anthony Eden being the main guy who were moving the League of Nations against Mussolini, and the only people who were doing anything in the League of Nations against Mussolini over Abyssinia. And I mean, why did the Brits care who ran Abyssinia? It was completely irrelevant to Britain who ran Abyssinia, and in fact, the Italians probably would have been better.
On that, we're going to disagree. But yeah, I mean, I'm the anti-imperialist in the chat, aren't I? So
yeah, well, I'm not an anti-imperialist at all, but I mean, also bear in mind that what Mussolini was actually doing was avenging the huge Italian defeat at Adua in 1896, I think it was, which was a battle where the Italians lost like 12,000 dead. It made things like Isan Lawana seem like small beer. They lost about 12,000 troops in a vast, enormous massacre in Abyssinia. And Mussolini was merely avenging that. And back in the 1890s, Britain was quite happy to cooperate with Italy in that part of the world when we were fighting against the Khalifa in the Sudan, leading up to the Battle of Omdurman in 1898, and then kicking the French out of Fashoda.
I don't disagree that Italy is in many ways a natural ally or anything. I mean, I like Italians. Italy's probably my favorite place on the continent to go. But with Greece running in short second, of course. But I would say that, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to things like invading Abyssinia, it was a very gratuitous thing, and I can't really.
But it wasn't a vital British interest, Ozzy. You can't
No,
argue it was.
no. And there was no point getting on knickers in a twist about it. But I mean, Britain itself used poison gas in the 1920s against
Where?
in Iraq against rebellious tribes. But
Did we?
yeah.
I'd need some citations for that, mate. I really would.
Yeah, sure. But
No, I'm not. Honestly, if you've got citations for that,
yeah,
we're not going to do it on stream. But please, in the Discord, I'd like some citations for that because I don't believe it at all.
Yeah. But I'm not condemning or saying it.
Because what Britain used to do in the 1920s, and the RAF, I know about a little bit about this because the RAF, to justify their existence in the 1920s, came up with this idea of air control. But the only way it was allowed was, even when the British were going to bomb the villages of rebellious tribesmen, they first had to fly a plane over and drop leaflets on the place in about 4 languages saying we're going to bomb you so that the people could bugger off. It was quite civilized in most.
I'm going to quickly retract my thing about poison gas in Mesopotamia. That's clearly been a historicism I've picked up from somewhere because it shows that there's actually quite a lot of historiography about this. But so moving that up aside from that.
Because I've certainly never heard of the Brits doing such a thing.
There has been a book written about it, but it seems to be relatively disputed. But moving on from that, I do find that the imperialism thing, that just invading a country in Africa because I want a piece of that, and I don't know. I feel very cynical about imperialism because not only has it basically not done anything for us at all, ever.
Adam in the chat says, didn't Attlee use Agent Orange in Malaya? No, he bloody well didn't. Agent Orange didn't even exist at that stage. But anyway, no. As I said, look, the Brits didn't use poison gas on anyone. I do believe the Italians may have done in their invasion of Abyssinia, but frankly, I'm not an Abyssinian, so I don't really care.
So I think part of this is coming from the fact that Winston Churchill argued in favor of the use of gas in 1919, according to War Office minutes.
I can well believe that because Winston Churchill was coming out with bullshit his whole entire career of military stuff.
Well, it sounds like another case of, as with the Bengal famine, where they tie a quote to Winston Churchill and assume that was policy.
Yeah, I mean, if the Bengal famine, I've read much nonsense about that. If you want to blame someone for the Bengal famine, you really ought to blame Donitz and the German U-boats, because the main reason for the Bengal famine was that the British didn't have enough merchant ships to move food around. Because the Germans and the Italians and the Japanese had been sinking our merchant ships.
I think I'd probably blame Japan for invading Burma, considering Burma was one of the major rice exporters to the Bengal region of the past.
Yeah, also true. I mean, I don't want to try and whitewash the Brits, but most of it, the overwhelming majority of the nonsense that people talk about the British Empire is utter crap. It really is. And modern historians, and I say historians in inverted commas because they're not, they're critical theory people, they come out with absolute bullshit about the British Empire.
The thing that I'm not coming at this from a criticism of Britain's actions. It's just that for me, seeing our actions on just trying to control the world with our tiny wee island. It's just, and then like only for us 100 or so years later to basically be maligned for it. It's just it makes me cynical. But we've been through this ad nauseum, so I don't want to take up too much time.
I tell you what, I would actually like one day to actually do a British Empire stream and talk about some of this stuff. I mean, even today, if you look at a country like India, for example, which has nuclear weapons, as does Pakistan, a lot of the infrastructure in modern India, like including nearly all the railways and many of the roads, the dams, the hospitals, the universities, the schools, were originally built by the British.
A lot of the major Asian imperialism wasn't even conducted by the British government, so it's a case of you would have to actively hobble your own corporate interests from doing what is in the national interest to some degree.
No. Yeah. I mean, the East India Trading Company was basically war via stocks. So, I mean...
Well, it was, but it was also, at that stage, you had many of those people went across to India and ended up marrying Indian women. And I don't mean having them as concubines. They married them, had children and families with them. And that carried on right up until the 1850s even.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also, it was a free training scheme sometimes for bureaucrats and generals and such. You know, obviously there's Arthur Wellesley particularly, who to some extent cut his teeth in India, and that was done at the expense of the East India Company, not the British government. So that, in that sense, they were more than happy to just sort of let the East India Company do what it wanted.
And of course, Arthur Wellesley, as Wellington as he then was, actually turned around and said, when asked what was the greatest thing he ever did in the army, and he said the Battle of Assaye, which was a battle where he was vastly outnumbered by the Indians. And this was a modern Indian army with artillery and all the rest of the stuff. It wasn't guys with spears.
Well, I mean, the Indian armies were never, atrociously outdated.
Well, even if you look at the First and Second Sikh Wars in the 1840s, the Sikhs had more guns and heavier guns than the British did.
Yeah, they had a particular note about the artillery in India at that time. The artillery that the non-British armies had, which were the ones that were kind of filled with the German mercenaries and the French at the time. They had like really good rockets, like Congreve ones, and they were used to kind of break up the British. And I think on the siege of Serip, whatever the fuck, the one with
Seringapatam was one of Wellington's battles, but that was like
the one with
50 years before what we're talking about now.
They'd been kind of using the same artillery, the Congreve rockets. They're like this massive.
Yeah, Tipu Sultan had rockets. Yes, he did. But I mean, when you're talking about the Sikh army in the 1840s with the First and Second Sikh Wars, the Sikh artillery had heavier guns and they had more guns than the British did. I mean, artillery pieces. And their infantry were all trained by European mercenaries.
Yes.
When I say European, Italian, French, and American for the most part.
And German and stuff.
Well, no, actually, Italian, French, and American for the most part.
Well, I know that.
I'm talking. Now, hang on. We're getting confused here, Napoleon. You're talking about when Wellesley was in India, which was like at the beginning of the 19th century, and I'm talking about the Anglo-Sikh Wars in the 1840s.
Okay, I was just making sure.
Yeah, but the same thing applies all through that period. Indian armies were not guys with spears. They were guys with muskets. They were guys with artillery, and often they were European trained. Absolutely, through all that period.
Yeah.
Yeah, they. It's quite a well-known thing that Eastern cannons, particularly before the horrors of explosive ammunition, were known to be pretty large. the Napoleonic Wars were largely fought with 9-pounders and 12-pounders and things like that. And the Ottomans would typically carry 18-pounder guns in their arsenal and all other sorts of.
Same with the Sikhs.
Yeah.
The same with the Sikhs, Aussie. Their artillery included lots of 12 and 18-pounder guns, and they had lots of them too. And also, the other thing that happened in the Anglo-Sikh Wars was that the Indian sepoys, who were the Indian soldiers on the British side, and every British brigade would have usually one British battalion and 2 Indian battalions, yeah? And with the exception of the Gurkhas, of course, the Indian battalions didn't like fighting the Sikhs. They were a bit scared of them because the Sikhs were very good soldiers. And so what very often happened is when the British, as they so often had to, tried to storm these Sikh entrenchments with heavier artillery than they had, the Indian regiments on either side would hang back and not actually charge in. And only the single British battalion would go in. And they would have to win hugely outnumbered. And they always, or almost always, did so because they were just amazingly brave men. But you'll never hear that talked about hardly at all.
Yeah, this extends to the particularly the First Opium War, I believe, as well, where the Chinese armies were not horrendously poorly equipped, and obviously had a colossal numbers advantage, but the difference in training, drill, leadership, organization, just all of it put together meant that they would just get absolutely trounced in basically every battle.
Well, I've also talked about this subject, Rupert, with Adam, who has looked into this, who sadly is not with us this evening. I hope he's okay. But Adam has looked into this quite a lot. And it's really a misnomer to call them the Opium Wars anyway, because that's not what they were fought for.
Go on.
Well, they were fought for allowing trade, for sure. But for example, what is often called the Second Opium War was really fought because the Chinese decided they were going to just board and occupy British merchant ships.
Yes. Yeah.
With neither a buy or leave, you know. And often these merchant ships were mostly crewed by Indian guys.
Oh, yeah. It was mainly conducted by the East India Company again.
Yeah.
They used
and the Chinese were not above, and frequently did. They captured merchant ship crews who were mostly Indians, but with a few British officers and so on. And they would then go and execute them, which they frequently did. There was a famous poem in the 19th century. They captured this Irish private, a British Army private, and they wanted him to kowtow, which is, bow your head down to the ground to this Mandarin.
Yeah,
and and this Irish private said, "No, I'm not going to do that." So they chopped his bloody head off.
Yeah, don't worry, I'm not particularly sympathetic to the plight of the Chinese during that period.
Yeah,
it's just,
I've never been sympathetic to the Chinese. I've never been sympathetic to anyone, basically. It's like I say. I mean, we got onto this whole subject because when the Italians invaded Abyssinia, I think the British should have said, "Well, okay then." Or maybe condemn it if you want to in a statement, like so often happens these days when something is nasty. People say, "Oh no, it's a bad story."
The argument that I've heard, which
not moving British warships around and so on, which we actually did.
The argument that I've heard, which seems fairly convincing as part of a wider trend, is that the problem is that the Italians were trying to do colonialism at a time when it wasn't really popular anymore among the educated classes. So the media went into revolt about it and sort of demanded that the British government do something about it.
Yeah, but the only person in the British government, and I have read a lot about this, who was really pushing this story was Anthony Eden. For whatever, he detested Mussolini for some reason. I don't know why. The Britain's nightmares. Britain was planning for World War II from like the mid-1930s onwards because it was obviously going to happen. But Britain had to plan: are we going to fight Japan in the Far East, which was originally what the Royal Navy thought was going to happen, or are we going to have to fight Germany in Europe? At no stage until Anthony Eden got involved did they think, we're also going to have to fight a really hard war against the very large and efficient Italian fleet in the Mediterranean. And that was Anthony Eden's doing. And the nightmare scenario for Britain in World War II was, particularly for the Navy, which is obviously the most important of the British Armed Forces, particularly back then, when it was still the largest Navy in the world, just about, the nightmare scenario was fighting Germany in Europe, in Northern Europe, Italy in the Mediterranean, and Japan in the Far East. And Anthony Eden absolutely made sure the nightmare scenario came true. And I tell you what, I don't care how many Abyssinians got killed relative to Britain not having to fight a war in the Mediterranean as well.
Well, apart from anything else, it also meant, like, obviously he couldn't have necessarily known that this was going to happen, but it also allowed the Anschluss to happen, because Mussolini was the one party that was stopping the Anschluss from happening earlier on in, is it 33?
Yeah,
I think.
Absolutely right. Yeah, when the Germans took over Austria, that was entirely, again, Anthony Eden.
Well, in a sort of roundabout way, but yes.
But then he backed Chamberlain when Chamberlain was doing his appeasement stuff. And actually, do you know what? I have a certain amount of sympathy with Chamberlain's appeasement stuff.
Oh, Caligula Bushman in the chat. Streza Front, that's the coalition against Germany. Italy was kicked out. I don't think it was ever actually formalized, but yeah, it was definitively ended by the time the invasion of Ethiopia happened.
But I mean, you know, who was Britain's allies? I mean, the French, who had like governments that changed every 3 or 4 weeks back then. And, you know, it's just, it was, I mean, they're not much better these days, but, you know, it was just nonsense. It really was. To make Italy an enemy of Britain in the 1930s was an insane thing to do. Anyone else got anything to say on that stuff before we move on to a different subject?
I was just going to say I need to be getting going now, so thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome, mate. You're always welcome on the stream.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.
Yeah, go on, man. Okay, next subject. Have people read the Net Zero Principles for Successful Behaviour Change Initiatives document that the British government put out by accident and then very quickly took down?
Yes. Yes.
It's a pretty nasty piece of work.
See, the thing is, it's kind of, it's, hang on, I'll be back in a minute.
Oh, okay. So I read it myself, and it's funny enough because I know a little bit about it. The main thing what they talk about is a policy called nudging. And the idea of nudging is that you don't make someone do something because it's illegal to do it otherwise. You do it because you're basically trying to convince people to change their behaviors. And that's basically what they talked about in this paper. And they basically said one of the most disconcerting things they said was you can convince people to change their opinions on anything simply by making something legal. So, and one of the Pew polls they showed was basically same-sex marriage. If you make same-sex marriage legal, it becomes very popular all of a sudden. I mean, could you imagine, like, this sort of the fact the government knows this? Could you imagine what if all of a sudden a pedophile rights group, decided to start funding money and basically saying, well, if we make it legal, people will accept us, or something like that? It's really pernicious. And of course, it's not limited to that, but that was like the thing that weirded me out the most. It's basically their idea that, like, yeah, we can make people do stuff simply by saying the government approves this. Oh, is anyone else here?
Yeah, sorry.
I thought I might have lost my connection. Yeah, and I mean, other things. They were sort of basically saying that, like, one of the big things that they want to do is basically nudge people into not eating meat anymore. For those who don't know, children who grow up vegan, particularly boys, although it is important for girls too, will end up smaller. Their bones are much more likely to not have enough bone marrow. They will not have the proper hormones. They do not experience puberty very well. And growth and repair and other general things that are important to create healthy young adults basically go out the window. And so the fact that governments basically kind of try and convince people that, like, no, actually, eating meat is bad for you and your child. And of course, there's that other thing about them disincentivizing people to have children. Certain groups of people, I might add, to not have children, to simply, reduce this threat of climate change, which is not as big a threat as they like to pretend it is. But hey ho.
Yeah, absolutely right. I don't know, man. I did a little stream on this last week. Sorry, I was just dying. I did a little stream on this last week, and the whole thing is pretty. What's the word?
Pernicious.
Pernicious is one way of looking at it, but it's even worse than that. I mean, as you say, what they want to stop people eating meat, like much meat at all, so far as I can see. They want to stop people flying as much as they can. And they want to get people to use extremely expensive and short-range electric cars.
Yeah.
It's and behind it all, if you look at it, what there is, and energy costs and so on. Energy costs are going to go through the roof. If you read that whole thing, behind everything they say is that everything's going to be much more expensive. And of course, if you put up energy costs, everything is going to go up because everyone who makes things has to use energy to do that. So it's going to put prices up like unbelievably. I think you're looking at energy costs far more than doubling in a relatively short space of time.
Yeah.
And also probably becoming less reliable.
Yeah. Something that people sort of forget is that energy extraction and use is possibly one of the big hallmarks of civilization. Most of the greatest advancements man has ever made is because he had access to things like fire, and also horse-drawn livestock to move stuff and all that sort of things. Energy is an incredibly important thing, and so if your access to energy is being reduced, you could make an argument that they are basically decivilizing you. Barbarizing you,
Yeah,
whatsoever.
I don't think that's wrong at all. I mean, I think that it fits entirely in line with the importation of how shall I describe it? Less civilized cultures into our nation.
Yeah, it's not. There is a lot of very uncomfortable things about this.
I mean, I like that meme that you put up, Ozzy, with the thing about the cows.
Yeah.
I thought that was exactly true. To be honest with you, I really did.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like the government will take away your cows and give you 2 cardboard cutouts, and then there'll be no milk for the calves, and so
Yeah.
they'll be dependent on government provided
Yeah.
soy milk.
Yeah.
And
So,
they'll turn it- yeah.
So you have 2 cows. The government prints out 2 cardboard cutout cows and then takes your 2 actual cows, leaving only the calves. The artificial hormone milk the government supplies makes the calves want to be bulls. You go bust and live on government provided soy milk.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, like, I've just put the link in the chat, by the way, guys. If you want to go and look at this stuff, I'll put it in there again. This is the link to this article, which I do suggest people go and read. There you go. I've just put it in the chat. And this was up on the government website. And if you go to the government website, you'll find this has been removed because it was put up in error. Yeah, I bet it was. I bet it was put up in error. And this is how they're going to get people to not, like, you see all this stuff where they talk about live in the pod and eat the bugs and you'll own nothing and be happy. This is exactly that.
Eat the bat, bigot.
Yeah, this is exactly what it is. And it just goes to prove, people will turn around and say, oh, no, these people are all tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists. They're not. This is what the government wants. And bear in mind, it's not just the British government. The Conservative Party just did their conference under the slogan Build Back Better. Joe Biden, Build Back Better. Macron, Build Back Better. All of these people are the same. This is something they have agreed amongst themselves, and they're going to do, and they are using how successful all the stuff they did around the China virus has been to inform how they're going to make us stop eating meat, stop using cars that are not electric and short ranged and extremely expensive, not fly so much overseas, unless you're an elite, of course, because it won't have no effect on those guys. Like, they've all just flown into Glasgow as we're speaking. It's really, guys, it's like this stuff is not a lie. There is this globalist elite plan, and as far as I can work out, they want us to all be 21st century serfs. And they think the more shithole country people they can pull into the place, the quicker we'll become 21st century serfs. That's my honest opinion. I think that is the ultimate reason for this mass third world immigration into every Western nation. The idea that Nigeria shouldn't be for Nigerians is completely unacceptable. But the idea that Britain should just be for British people, or America should be for American people, or God forbid Germany should be for German people, that is completely infra-dig. You just can't say that. But it's only for that one group of people, and it's us.
Sorry, I'm back, gents. I had to move something. My mum wanted me to move something back to her room, so it took quite a while. But
no, that's all right, man. You're helping your mum. That's a civilized and good thing to do.
Yeah.
So, did you hear any of what we were talking about, Napoleon?
Well, no, I was too busy heavy lifting a bunch of useless shit. So.
Oh, he's such a big man.
That's all right. He was helping his Aussie. He was helping his mum. That's good. What we were talking about, Napoleon, was this principles for the successful net zero stuff Did you read any of that? I put it up on the Discord several times.
Yeah, and I was able. I only read a bit of it, but the bit that I did read, I was able to interpret pretty well because it's bogged down in quite a lot of tosh. That's the word. So I kind of stopped reading because I didn't give a shit because I knew that the reaction was going to be horrendous anyway. So I didn't really see the point in investigating it too much. But yeah, it was pretty how do you say atrocious.
Yeah, they basically want to turn us into vegetarians. They want us using short-ranged, extremely expensive electric cars that the national grid at the moment couldn't even charge, even if we had them. They want people to fly far less, and energy costs are going to go through the roof. I mean, it's basically just a way to beggar people. It's going to make people poor. Because as Ozzy was saying before, like a mark of civilization is that you can have efficient energy. If you can't have efficient energy, I mean, South Africa, for example, because I used to live in South Africa, I know a lot of people who still live there, and South Africa used to have a very good power grid system. But under the ANC government, surprise, surprise, they have constant brownouts all over the place where they just have power cuts all the time. Like if you live in one town, you can expect like 2 or 3 power cuts a week. And they want to make everywhere in the West just like that. And that will happen because with all of this watermelon green stuff, and I say watermelon because it's green on the outside but red on the inside. It's communist socialist red on the inside. Which Alexander Boris Johnson totally supports. All of this stuff, you can't store the energy that you take in from these extremely expensive, inefficient wind turbines, etc. You can't store it. There is no way of storing it. So if the wind don't blow, you're going to have no damn power. And to take it to an even more basic level, like a really basic level, Britain today, as we speak now, produces considerably less than 1% of all the CO2 emissions in the world. Less than 1%. China produces 27% plus. Now, Britain, even if we didn't produce anything, even if we got to this so-called net zero, would be reducing from less than 1% to nothing, which is like nothing, basically. Whereas China is 27% now, but China is now building at least 100 new coal-fired power stations. And India is just as bad. Pakistan is just as bad. Indonesia is just as bad. It's just absolute nonsense. Like even if Australia is apparently committing to something similar to the net zero story, and like Britain and Australia, with our populations, like 65, 67 million in Britain and 25, maybe 26 million in Australia, that's not going to reduce anything. Even if we don't produce any emissions at all, it will make no fucking difference. Ozzy, what do you reckon of that, mate? Can you I know you're into your statistics and figures and stuff. Like reducing from under 1% to nothing is going to make no damn difference.
Yeah, the argument given is that is not necessarily that Britain's the instrumental thing. It's that we are disproportionately affecting it, which is almost certainly true. But here's the thing. While I accept that climate change is a thing, I think the planet is getting warmer and man-made fossil fuels have something to do with it. One, I don't think that's as big a problem as people like to make it out to be. And two, it's not really our problem. Here's the thing: like, if the Earth gets warmer, that basically means that places it basically means that like places further south have more natural disasters. Oh no, no, not places in like, you know, I really do not care if Thailand has another earthquake, no, not an earthquake, a hurricane every year or something like that. It just doesn't affect me whatsoever. Britain could theoretically, you know, like if we reduced it, like what could we maybe reduce the global warming rate by 0.01 degrees over the next 10 years? Wow. Really?
But I mean, what I'm saying, Ozzy, is that like China is 27% plus of CO2 emissions. UK is way under 1%. But if China is building another 100 coal-fired power stations, anything UK does, that will just be swallowed totally.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and another thing to remember is that China likes to buy cheap coal, and one of the things about coal is that coal has different levels of dirt depending where, like, it can produce different amounts of pollutants depending on where it's from and what its geographic history is and things like that. Because it's partly due to the sort of trees that, because coal, of course, is made from old fossilized trees. It depends on what sort of trees were there originally and things like that.
Yeah, yep.
And the Chinese like to buy the cheapest crap, and normally, I mean, there's some pretty hard things that goes on in China. Like, it's known that like production plants in China produce so much crap that you know, it can give children incontinence or brain damage and things like that.
They have almost no pollution controls at all in China.
Yeah. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It would be a drop in the bucket if the UK got rid of anything.
But what I can't understand, you see, is why all these insulate Britain and climate change people, why are they not all outside the Chinese embassy? I mean, of course, the Chinese won't take any notice of them, but at least they'd be in the right place.
Because they got lied to.
See, I don't think they did, Napoleon. I think they're mainly anti-Western, these people. And also, here's another one, and I absolutely agree with this. For Britain Democratic Nationalists, CO2 is not a pollutant. Plants like CO2. Like, if you have a greenhouse in, say, the Netherlands, and you're growing stuff in a greenhouse, you up the CO2 rates because plants like it.
Nah. It's less to do with that. It's not to do with the plants, so to say. It's to do with because CO2. You know, if you've been inside a greenhouse is also very warm, and that can have consequences. But none of those consequences are particularly pertinent to Britain.
Yeah, I mean, but even a country like Australia. I mean, Australia's weather might get a little bit more wild, but actually it might also give us more rain. It sometimes does. And that's no bad thing in Australia, you know, which is a country subject to drought. I just think it's a nonsense. And really what it's designed to do, in my opinion, and I reckon the years that we've had all this climate change stuff being spewed out by left-wing people from universities, I don't really think it's about climate change at all. I think it's about the whole globalist agenda, which is to basically make Western nations and average people in Western nations vastly poorer than they have traditionally been over the last 50 to 70 years.
Yeah.
I think that's the real agenda about this. You know, no one's going to stop Alexander Boris Johnson and senile Biden and Macron and all these other winks flying all over the world and going wherever they want. No one is going to do that to the likes of Bill Gates or any of these rich buggers who own Amazon and all the rest of it. no one's going to change anything about what they do. They'll go everywhere they like on their little private jets. It's the ordinary people who will no longer have the opportunity to go and have like 2 weeks in Greece or Italy or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some. I would personally argue that it's not to do with impoverishing people. I think it's more to do with this idea of control. Governments have a natural incentive to want to control people. This instance is just no exception to that. I think that's probably the main reason behind this all. I simply suspect that the government is saying, well, look, here we have an opportunity to basically make sure we know where everyone is, we know what they eat, we know how their diet is. This could most people in their own minds do not think of themselves as evil. So they're probably thinking this could actually make, the world a better place or something like that. I don't know. And so that would be my personal assertion, but
even after you have seen this stuff about the China virus, or
well, yeah, you can make the argument that these people probably released this virus, which I basically accept now. I'm like 90% certain that the virus was, one, man-made, and two, was used for a reason. I don't know what that reason would be, but it's probably quite likely to do with government control. Even then, if they made this virus, they could. I could still foreseeably see them say, "Well, we did this to make sure that we could look after the people, and so we know where everyone is, and blah 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 blah. It's for the greater good."
Have you seen the stuff from Melbourne, Australia, Ozzy?
Yeah, but again,
I'm talking about anti-terrorist units being used against peaceful protesters who are just trying to earn money to feed their families. Armored cars, plastic bullets, tear gas, and the latest one we've got is you can get 2 years in jail for not wearing a mask in Victoria.
Yeah, sure. No, that's happening and all that. I'm not saying that it isn't happening, but what I am saying is that people, they might be doing that for reasons that they don't see as malevolent. I don't think most people see themselves as the bad guys. I mean, even Adolf Hitler, wrote Mein Kampf and talks about how amazing of a human being he was. Like people talk about this stuff. People just say, yeah, what I was doing was for the greater good. Of course, I don't think it is for the greater good, but that's a different discussion.
Well, I mean, the thing that got me about this net zero thing was it just showed that, the idea that they want you to live in a pod and eat the bugs is absolutely true.
Yeah.
That is exactly what they want. They want you to live in a pod and not even eat the bugs. They want you to eat grass.
Yeah. It's a bit. Yeah, it's all a bit pernicious. That's all I really have to add to it.
Yeah, it's pretty evil. Napoleon, your thoughts?
Hello. Is it? Sorry, it's just because I haven't been in this too long. I've only been hearing a bit of snippets here and there because I was reading something. You're still on about the thing that
the docket
released.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Because you were talking about the video about that Ryan Falk released about how COVID was intentional and all that.
Listen, hang on, Napoleon. I don't know. It was certainly intentionally made, Whether it was intentionally released or it was accidentally released, I think that is a bit up in the air. But it was certainly something that
Okay.
came from a laboratory.
Okay, I'll just stick to the talk. Okay, I don't know what see. It is immoral, the things that they want to add, but I mean, the way that they said it was it kind of made me think that their intention was to be very immoral, because intention for me is very important, and I don't think that the government would do things intentionally to be immoral a lot of the
Really?
time. But I think, well, no, okay, right, okay. There's a difference between putting in policies which are fucking it, excuse me, my stutter. I need a drink of water.
That's
There's a
okay.
difference between putting in policies that are immoral but having a very good intention for them, and putting in policies that you know are going to fuck things up, and basically that you know are immoral but you're pushing them anyway. I don't think there's been a lot of that in Britain, but I think with this Tocket thing, I think it probably is. They have no good intention, for fuck's sakes. I mean, in the political theatre, like Parliament, each side has their own kind of raison d'etre. They have their own political affiliation, and their political affiliation is like they either do it for money or they do it because they genuinely want to improve life. But I don't think a lot of them do things intentionally just to be immoral. Like, it's not like they just want to see the world burn or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Really?
just,
That surprises me, man. That's a very surprising take to me.
I don't know. I put a lot of stock in the saying, "Do not attribute to malevolence what you can attribute to stupidity."
Yeah, that is perfect. That's a perfect
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. No, I know that, but honestly, Ozzy, you've read this damn document, and I know you didn't like it. And you
No. I think the document.
and you watched Ryan Falk's film about the China virus. So I don't know, man. It's
No. I like people do, but people. It's not out of the realm of possibility though that people do bad things for what they see as good reasons. That's would be my contention. I do not. I really, most people genuinely cannot exist without thinking that they are a good person, or at least thinking that like what they're doing is aimed at some sort of good.
Do you really think that these? And I'm not now talking about like the old aristocracy and like upper middle class people, which I would say you're probably related to. But do you not think that these modern, in inverted commas, elites like Macron, senile Biden, Alexander Boris Johnson, and many others, I don't think they even see most of us as human at all. I think they see us as ants.
Yeah,
I don't think they see
don't
us
know.
as fully human. I don't think they think we're fully human at all. I think they look on us
Well,
as a far lower level than someone like Henry V would have regarded his archers at Agincourt.
Possibly. I don't really like. I mean, for me, that would just be conjecture because it's like
yeah, we don't know that.
You're roboting, Ozzy. You're roboting a bit, man.
All right.
Honestly, I think that someone like Henry V, or even George III, for God's sake, would have regarded his average soldiers, etc., and citizens as more human than these people do. See, I have this theory, which I think is correct, that somebody like if you've got enough money, and I'm talking about the likes of Bill Gates or that idiot who's just had to give about a quarter of his money to the woman he was married to for several years, who runs Amazon, and all of these bloody idiots, and all of the people who run the so-called democratic governments these days. I think those guys, they can live a perfectly great life, even if the whole world is like South Africa, because they can live on a 50-acre property with
Yeah.
500 security guards. It's like if I had unlimited money, I could go and get myself a property next to Umfolozi Shishui Game Reserve in South Africa, and absolutely live the life of Riley, you know. And when I didn't want to be there, I'd get on my private yacht and go sailing somewhere else, and I'd have like a security deal on my yacht. And I think these guys can live an absolutely perfect life in the most shit world you can possibly imagine. And I think that's where we are now headed, is for an absolutely shit world with this tiny 1% people running us.
I don't think it's just 1% people. I think it's also 13% people. I think.
Yeah, not that many, mate. Not that many.
Yeah, I think you've glided past a terrible joke there, Duke.
Sorry. What was the joke? Do tell me. I'll beg your pardon.
Those damn 13%ers.
Oh yeah, okay, right.
They're taking our property, our lives, our
for Britain Democratic Nationalists as neo-feudalism. I think it's much worse than that. Much worse than that. Like, I really do. I think they regard us as ordinary human beings as ants. I really do. I don't think they have any regard. Look, the idea that Alexander Boris Johnson has a single patriotic bone in his body is impossible for me to believe these days. I don't think I think he could quite easily live in Ethiopia or South Africa or Argentina, and it wouldn't make any difference to him. He would live in exactly the same way as how he lives now. I don't think he has the slightest care for Britain.
Yeah, I'm just going to plead agnosticism because, like, they probably disagree with quite a lot. Like, you know, they probably have a very different conception of what they view as Britain and British people. But, like, for me to believe that they like see themselves like they see themselves as like, Mwahaha, I'm here to control the world. I know it's just.
What's he doing in Glasgow at the moment, Ozzy?
He's doing a climate conference.
Yeah, but why is he doing it? We already discussed this, and like reducing Britain from less than 1% to nothing is going to make no difference, even if you believe all of the bullshit they talk about climate change. It's going to make no, particularly when you've got China building another 100 coal-fired power stations. It's like pissing into the wind.
Yeah, well, it's more about. I think it's just the meme. I think not in terms of its comedic reference, in terms of just, you know, as a psychological idea. Like, people have bought into something, they've bought into the thing, and now they continue to push it. It's not. I can't. I really struggle to see it as anything other than that, as opposed to. Mwahaha. That's all I can really say on it. It's because, like, well, yeah.
All right, fair enough. I'm just going to put up a little thing here that I want to publicize from a friend of the channel before we carry on with this conversation. I would just say, guys, go and check this out. It's coming out, I think, tomorrow or maybe the next day. But this is like the first new stuff, new video of Jonathan Bowden. And I'm a huge admirer of Jonathan Bowden. That's come out for years. So I would suggest everyone goes and checks that out and goes and subscribes to that channel. I like I say, Bowden. I wish that poor bugger hadn't died so young, because we could really do with him now.
Hmm.
But anyway,
Yeah.
go and check that out, guys. And the chap who runs that channel is a good friend of this channel, so go for it.
Hmm.
But anyway, yeah, guys, I just find it difficult, especially with you, Ozzy, because I know you're an intelligent guy, that you cannot see like how anti-British everything that Alexander Boris Johnson is doing at the moment.
Oh, no. I'm aware. I'm aware it's anti-British. It's not the question of the action. It's a question of the intent.
But what does he think? All right, I mean, he went to Eton and was it Oxford or Cambridge? I can't remember now.
He went to Balliol.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
So,
that
like,
doesn't really.
So I doubt he's like a thicko. So what the hell does he think he's doing by reducing Britain from less than 1% to nothing when China is 27% plus and rising? Where does he not get this? Hang on. If I'm going to do the best deal for Britain, I might slightly try and reduce our stuff, but it's not going to make all that much difference, because really, what really matters is what China and India do.
There's a general understanding that smart people are able to create ideas, are basically better able to justify their positions, not necessarily because their positions are right, but because they can generate enough bullshit to keep it afloat.
And
I would conjecture that the reason why a lot of smart people, would follow that is that they're not necessarily being stupid or smart or whatever. They're basically just, they bought into the idea of climate change, which is basically almost a new religion. And now
it's been pushed for the last 20 years
among the upper class.
Middle class. Don't do that.
Well, okay, upper middle. Yeah.
Upper and middle class. The working class, by and large, don't agree with it at all.
No.
And a lot of people who I respect, who are intelligent and knowledgeable and often qualified, don't agree with it either. In terms of the human-made climate change story.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a.
Hang on, Napoleon. If you're gonna hum,
mute yourself, pal.
Mute yourself, man.
Well, oh no, sorry, I was just opening.
You were humming. Yeah.
Was I?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you were you were more doing tum-ta-tum-tums. I don't know, or whatever it's called, but like.
Yeah, I do that occasionally too. But if you're gonna do it, Napoleon, please mute yourself.
No, I thought I was okay. This microphone is just absolutely ridiculous. This window is on the other side of my room, for fuck's sakes, and you could hear me humming. That is absolutely ridiculous. I thought I was out of earshot.
No, you have to mute yourself, mate, if you're going to make noise. But anyway, sorry, Ozzy, you were saying.
I've lost my train of thought.
Well, I just can't believe that these guys are so dim-witted that they're just doing this by accident. I just don't believe it, mate.
No,
sorry.
Again, it's not by accident. It's from what they see as good intentions.
But how can an intelligent man believe that reducing Britain from under 1% to nothing, whilst it totally making everyone in Britain vastly worse off than they are now, when he's supposed to be the Prime Minister of Britain, How can someone think that's all right when they know damn well that China, that produces over 27% of emissions already, is building another 100 coal-fired power stations, and that takes no account of what India and Indonesia and every other shithole in the world is doing.
Well, if you consider that most people consider climate change some form of apocalypse, then I think you sort of seem to understand it. Now, I don't personally think it's going to be an apocalypse.
No, I don't either. But even if you think it's going to be an apocalypse, reducing UK from under 1% to nothing is going to make virtually no difference if China is going to go from 27% to 35%.
Yeah, but this is the small number fallacy. So here's the thing: if I told you, okay, I have 2 coins here. Mm-hmm. On one of the coins, there is a 99.9999999% chance that you'll get heads and you'll die.
Mm-hmm.
No. 19, you'll get heads and you'll live. Sorry, that's the wrong thing. Or on the other one, if I flip it, you have a 100% chance of living no matter what happens.
Mm-hmm.
You will always, no matter what, choose the coin with the 100% chance. And so it's just a little quirk of human psychology that basically reducing the probability of something that, like, that it's in your best interest to continue to reduce the probability of it. Not saying I'm agree with it, but like it's a good way of basically understanding the problem from a less whatever.
Are you serious? That's seriously your argument?
And it's not my argument. It's my rationalization of what an actual climate activist could feel about.
All right. Let me put this in another way. The British Army today can come up with, if they really worked at it, maybe just about a really 1 week division. Okay.
Mm.
Would that British Army, however well trained and brilliant it was, be able to be, I don't know, let's take an example that I know is less than the truth. 50 communist Chinese Party divisions. Would it be able to beat them? Even if it was like the most fabulous division in the world, would they be able to win against 50 Chinese Communist Party divisions?
Probably not. That is contextual.
Okay. All right. Well, let me tell you, even if one British division was the best division in the whole world, which it certainly wouldn't be now because they lack loads of things that they need. But even if it was, one British division might maybe in a defensive position hold out against 4 Chinese divisions, really pushing it. But if there were 50, they're all going to die. Every single one of them is going to die. All right? And that's just common sense. So to me, you see, when I look at something like supposed man-made climate change, and I see the Brits produce less than 1% of all the emissions in the world, and the Chinese produce 27% now, but it's going to go up to 33%, it just makes me go, well, nothing Britain does is going to make a slight fucking difference overall in the world. Nothing. It's virtue signaling nonsense. And it's going to make every single person in Britain much, much poorer. And I don't, Ozzy, I respect you, man. You're a very intelligent bloke, but you don't seem to grasp that.
No, I do grasp it. I'm not talking.
You're making excuses for Alexander Boris Johnson.
I'm not making excuses, Duke. Like, if you go back to the roots of the conversation, the discussion was about whether these people think that they're doing good or not.
All right.
And
all right, fair enough. I'm going to try again. How on earth, if Alexander Boris Johnson was an honest man, and I don't think he is for a nanosecond, But if he was, how on earth can he really believe that? Because he can't be a dumb twat. He's got to be lying, man.
You can get people to believe just about anything if you.
You think you can get the likes of Alexander Boris Johnson with the education that he's had to believe just about anything?
Yeah. Especially with that sort of education. It's normally the smartest people who are peddling this identity politics bullshit. Like that's almost
okay. So are you saying that basically he's stupid?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that whatever he's doing, he might be thinking he's doing it for good reasons.
All right. Put your well-educated public school hat on, and try to explain to me. And I'm not having a go at you, Ozzy. I'm not. It's Johnson who makes me angry, not you. Put your public school hat on, and try to explain to me how reducing Britain from under 1% to nothing, and basically making everyone in the UK vastly poorer is a good thing for a British Prime Minister to do when he knows China is going from 27% plus to 35%.
Again, like it's not to do with that. Again, it's like
so there's no common sense.
Oh, come on, man. Come on. You give me this question, you've got to let me fucking respond to it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, okay. So here's the thing. It's not about this sort of how could he be so stupid? How could he not see this? Forget about that for a minute, okay? Yep. What he would see it as, if he believes that global warming is real, and reduce, and and he has the power to get Britain to, the centrist speaks, charming. I don't think.
Hang on, 16-bit Oswald. Ozzy's not a centrist, all right? He wouldn't be on my Discord if he was, so he's not.
So if you're told, okay, so I have a 99% probability of something happen, climate change is going to happen, but I can reduce the probability even by 1%, then maybe to Boris Johnson that seems like a worthwhile thing to do. I don't think he's right, but it is a logically sound point of view.
But it's not. It's not, Ozzy, because we're already under 1%, right? So he can't, even if he makes Britain into a Stone Age culture, which is the way they're pushing us, even if he does that, it's going to go down less than 1%. But he knows those extra 100 power stations in China are going to push up China's thing from plus 27% to 35 or whatever it will be. And that's leaving aside India and Indonesia and every other shithole you can think of.
Okay, Duke. Let me just put forward the question to you, okay? And don't try not to think about it in terms of climate change or anything. Just think of it on the value of the question at face, okay?
Sure.
I'm told, I tell you that you have two options. You can either not play this game, or you can play the game. If you win the game, you get nothing. But if you lose the game, which will only happen 0.00001% of the time, you die. Which of the choices do you pick? The answer.
That's not the position that Boris Johnson is in. I'm sorry.
Well, no, because it is a functioning logic. Because the answer we both know is that neither of us will play the game.
Yeah.
Because it does make sense. But maybe I'm not I don't know. I've never met Boris Johnson. So I can't be an expert on the guy. But for me personally, I do not think that people that he will be seeing this as him doing a bad thing. What he's probably seeing this as is reducing the chance of an apocalypse, even if it is by 1% or
What
0.01%.
what apocalypse does he think he's going to get for a start?
Well, Project Fear, climate change, the end of the world. Ooh.
Do you really think he believes that?
Yes. I know.
I don't believe that for a second, man. I think I think it's as made up as the China virus is like the Black Death. I think it's just made up as that, man. I really and
Okay.
you have just changed your mind on this, Ozzy. You now have said, and quite rightly, in my opinion, that this is a man-made virus.
Yeah.
Because the evidence is overwhelming. It's a man-made virus.
Yeah. I mean that's sort of a pivot. But
Look,
I mean,
James.
all I'm going to say, don't worry, Nappy. I'll let you speak in a second. All I'm going to say is that I know lots of smart people in terms of the ability to solve complex problems quickly, a traditional meaning of intelligence, who will basically say, "Oh yeah, climate change is real." Like, in fact, I would wager that there's more smart people who believe it than stupid people. And I'm not saying that means that it's right. I'm saying that smart people are much more likely to buy bullshit. Genuinely, that's a position I hold.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, man. I don't. And you know what? You actually convinced me that, yeah, there probably is some climate change. Whether it's human-made climate change, I think, is a completely different story. And even if it is, it's not world-ending by any means.
No, it's not. No, that's the main thing. It's like, is it going to end the world or not? I do not personally think it will.
No. I mean, how many times have we been told these low-lying islands are going to sink, and yet somehow they're still there?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things about climate change is that people talk about how we'll run out of food when the world gets warm. But something they kind of seem to forget is that when the world was warm, more plants grow.
Yeah, plants like CO2.
Well, no. Well, it's not even necessarily related to CO2. It's just a simple fact that more plants will grow in humid temperatures. So if there's more evaporation,
there have been times in the UK when more of the land in the UK has been usable for farming than it has been at other times because the climate has changed.
Yeah. So,
like, climate change is something that happens constantly in the world. It just does. And it's not all human-made, and most of it's not human-made. Now, have we done stuff to up CO2 levels over the last 100 years? Well, maybe, but it's not going to end life. You know, it's not something that is going to say, oh, okay, humans are all going to die. Loads of animal species are going to die. I mean, I have seen this bullshit about polar bears, for example, for ages. There are more polar bears today than there were 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite facts of all time. It's hilarious that.
The Arctic ice is all going to melt. Nonsense. It hasn't happened at all. There was thicker ice last year than there was 10 years ago.
Yeah. It's to do with general trends, though. And the general trend is that temperature's going up. All I would say is that it's not a big problem. It's really not that big a problem.
Yeah, even if the world temperature rose by 1 degree, which is more than most of these climate scientists talk about, that's not going to end human life. It might change where you grow certain crops, but it won't change anything else.
Mm. Yeah. But yeah.
I mean, how many times have we been told these little island nations are going to disappear under floods? Never happens.
Mm.
Not once has it happened. Every single alarmist thing that you hear from these climate change watermelon people never happens. None of them ever do. It's all a bloody lie. Venice. Eva Doberman in the chat. Venice. The biggest problem in Venice is not rising water levels. It's the wooden things that keep up most of the buildings. And it has been that for years. It's the wooden piles that they have to replace under the buildings. Sorry, you haven't said anything for ages, Napoleon.
I was just about to say a couple of minutes ago that we should probably move on to something else because we kind of went in like a circle.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I don't think we have, you see. I think this is quite an important issue. And I'd still, despite all the sense that Aussie has been speaking to some point, I still don't understand how an intelligent man like Alexander Boris Johnson can possibly agree with this shit when, even if you believe all of the worst of the watermelon green stories, you're looking at reducing Britain from under 1% to nothing. And China is going from plus 27% to 35%. It's completely ridiculous. And like, if you had an old-time politician like Lord Salisbury, for example, he would have turned around and said, this is bollocks, we're not doing that. And I've had people in the chat turning around and saying, well, if Johnson didn't do that, he'd get murdered or he'd lose his job because the globalists would get rid of him. And I'll be honest with you, that makes more sense to me than many other things I've heard. It does, because I just don't understand how any sane human being can do what Boris Johnson is trying to say he's going to do at the moment. I just don't get it. I mean, if it was a lefty, I would get it, because like lefties basically want to destroy your country. But Boris Johnson supposedly, in inverted commas, is a conservative. Yeah, right. It's absolute nonsense, and I just don't believe it. I'm sorry. And as Lady Charlotte's in the chat here, and I like Lady Charlotte. She's a good lady from originally Northern Ireland who's in Australia these days. And you, I beg your pardon, sir?
Nothing. What did you say?
You don't be. I'm sorry, Napoleon. Don't be rude. Don't be rude to women on my stream.
I was joking.
Yeah, thank you. But you know, she lives in Victoria like I do, and like I said, we've had anti-terrorist police units on the streets of Melbourne, firing plastic bullets and tear gas, and with armored cars, and 2 years in prison for not wearing a mask. And we're supposed to believe that these people who are in charge of us, like dictator Dan Andrews in Victoria and Alexander Boris Johnson in the UK, somehow or another, they think they're connected to the real people of their nations. And I just don't think they are. I think they regard us as ants. I just don't believe that they have our best interest at heart at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, we will now move on to another subject. Where are we? Let me find this. Okay, this might be interesting to you guys. World leaders approve historic corporate tax deal. From now on, every corporate company will have a 15% tax rate wherever they go around the world. Isn't that good? Don't you think?
To be honest,
this is from the Bias Brainwashing Corporation site, by the way.
Not to be rude or anything, but stuff like that is obviously a bit retarded, but it's also just very boring. You ought to like put
Okay, it's not desperately exciting. I get you, but what I'm trying to point out to you is what they're really doing is they're allowing any globalist corporation to land in any country they want and get exactly the same tax rate. Do you see where that goes? That means they don't get a lower tax rate in one country and a higher tax rate in the other. Everywhere is just the same. It's kind of like it's one of the most globalist things you can do.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying there, Napoleon?
You're gonna someone light my feet on fire because no one's gonna like this, but I like it because
Why?
The understanding of the corporation tax. You've got to understand that this is not a business tax.
It's not corporation tax.
Yeah. A lot of people get confused, and the other thing is that a corporation tax is not a tax on revenue; it's a tax on profit.
Yep.
So if you if you make if you make more money than the company spends, the government will tax it. And the reason I like this is because companies like Google, Starbucks, big sort of conglomerate.
Most of the big companies, yeah.
Yeah. What they'll do is they'll do nice wee hacks like they'll have like shops in Britain or whatever, and then they won't declare their tax. They don't have to declare their tax because they're not based here. They'll have their headquarters in Ireland, and then they'll declare their tax there. And Ireland, of course, has a very, very low tax.
So does that mean, Ozzy, you know more about economics than I do because I find economics quite boring. But does that mean that Ireland's going to lose a lot of those big companies that were based in Ireland?
Yeah.
And you think that's a good thing, do you?
I think companies paying tax is a good thing.
I think companies paying tax is a good thing. I'm not sure that I agree that there should be a world tax rate is a good thing. I'm not a globalist, you see. I'm just not.
It's not a matter of globalism for me. It's just a matter of...
But that's what this is.
I guess you could say it is. The other argument you could take is that it's basically just making sure that companies don't use a really cheesy tactic to not pay tax. And because... And for me, what can I say? I'm not the biggest fans of big companies like Google. I'm almost as anti-big business. I'm almost as anti-big business as I am anti-big government. And one of those things will therefore be making sure that those companies actually pay. Like Amazon, for example, basically works people who can barely afford to even drive to work as a consequence of their job. To death, and then they pay no corporate tax.
I don't disagree with any of that. I just am not in favor of all the nations in the world saying, yeah, well, we're going to do the same ever about anything.
Yeah, but the thing is that the theory behind it will be then is that the companies will go, oh well, look, it looks like we're paying the same tax. Was paying the same tax rate no matter where we go. We might as go somewhere where the best business regulations are, and pay tax there.
But aren't those getting homogenized as well? Like the regulations around business, aren't they getting homogenized too? Like the same
not particularly. I mean. You get a lot of free reign. Most countries get a lot of free reign into how much regulation they set, and organizations like the IMF and the World Bank, which are financial relief and economic planning societies, have been trying to get these countries to become more free markets and all that for the benefit of the investors and all that sort of cringe stuff. But they failed. Those sort of policies don't work really well. Classic example of this is Greece. Greece keeps getting loan after loan because they're amazingly lazy buggers, and I love them for it. And
pretty girls in Greece.
Yeah, and then they get someone comes up to them and says, "Pay us money," and they go, "No."
All right. Next story.
Yeah.
This is also from the Bias Brainwashing Corporations. I've got a few from here. Then, I feel free. LGBT Afghan refugee arrive in UK. The BBC speaks to one of the 29 LGBT refugees who fled the Taliban, fearing for their lives. So they've arrived in Britain, and now they feel free. What do you think of that, guys? Isn't it great that after 20 years in Afghanistan and 600 dead British soldiers, we have 29 LGBT refugees in Britain who fled the Taliban from Afghanistan? Doesn't that make you proud to be British?
I feel even more proud about the fact that I want Britain to be known as a place for freedom, not a place, not a place for like.
Send them back as ambassadors for the
I'd send them back. I would. I'd send them back and drop them off from helicopters 200 feet over Kabul. But that's just me. Honestly, that's just me. That's what I do.
You guys don't understand, okay? The only thing that there is about Britain is freedom, okay? And that's why people should come.
No. Don't agree at all. Britain is not about freedom. Britain is about being British.
It sounds like a pretty bigoted thing to say, Duke.
Well, then call me a bigot, because that's what I must be then. Because I think Britain is about being British. Now, if they were British, I wouldn't chuck them off buildings. But I don't want to import LGBT people from Afghanistan at all. In fact, I don't want to import anyone from Afghanistan, actually. None, not one person. And I'm not interested in an LGBT person arriving in Britain, and there are a whole 29 of them apparently, and then delighting in the fact that because like 500 British soldiers died in Afghanistan, they can come to Britain. I'm sorry, that's like shit to me. Give me back those 500 British soldiers who died there. Their fathers, their brothers, their sisters, their sons. And fuck those LGBTQ people. I don't care about them at all. Is that what we spent 20 years in Afghanistan to do? Was to import 29 Afghani LGBTQ people? I'm sorry.
Also to line defense contractors' budgets, but you know.
Not British ones. Not British ones, man. British government didn't make the. Well, I dare say some people did.
BAE Systems in Augusta Westland.
Yeah, well, BAE Systems is like one of the most corrupt organizations in the entire world. But that's because it's the one too big British defense organization, and like how many governments have like done that? But I mean, what we're really saying here, or what the Bias Brainwashing Corporation is saying here, is, oh my God, isn't it great? We've got 29 Afghan LGBTQ people, and it only cost over 500 British soldiers, brave British soldiers, you know, husbands, fathers, sons, brothers, and all of those guys died to end up with 29 LGBTQ wanks in the UK from Afghanistan. I'm sorry. Bad deal. It's a bit like, you know, Alexander Johnson saying less than 1% of the emissions in the world being reduced while China goes from 27% to 35%. That's all right. I mean, it's another bad deal that if you had a good prime minister like, you know, Lord Salisbury, would have said, no fucking way am I doing that shit. Like a good common sense bloke would have said, no, I'm not doing that. But we don't live in that age anymore. We just don't. And it's just another sign of utter shit, really. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Greta Thunberg mobbed as activists gather for COP26. And there's a picture of Greta Thunberg with alcohol syndrome eyes. Her mother is a famous feminist, and her father is probably not much of a man. And she's wearing this full-on mask, of course. And that's probably all we need to say about that one. Then we have 5 murder arrests after a man stabbed in Liverpool. And none of the people are named. So, I don't know. We can possibly guess that the people not named might not have very English names.
Yeah.
I think because they never like when they're English, they're named. If they're not English, then they're not named.
I'm going to need to pop off now.
No worries, man. No worries.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on.
No problem. All the best. Hope to see you next week, hopefully.
Yeah, go well, man. Listen, I've not been having a go at you, mate.
No, I understand.
I'm really getting over this shit. There's just so much lying going on at the moment. And I know you try and rationalize it, but I don't think you're right about the rationalizations. But thank you for coming on. I like
problem.
you. You're always welcome on our streams, man. You're one of our best guys. So go well.
All right. See you, fellas. All the best.
No
Yeah.
What's going on?
I'm just.
Aussie's going off, but we haven't finished.
Yeah. All right. Bye, our chat. All the best.
Go on, man.
What a lovely bloke.
No, listen, Aussie is great. He's one of my favorite people that I have on these streams. I don't always agree with him, but I like Aussie a lot. Anyway, we're going to carry on for a minute, just for a couple of other things that we want to talk about. Where are we?
Sure.
Fans need COVID passes as rugby full house returns. So if you want to go and watch rugby in the UK, in Wales, you must have a COVID pass, according to the Bias Brainwashing Corporation. What else did we have here? Okay, there was some other stuff. This was UK news. And I'm going to now switch us to world news. What else do? Here we go. Let's see. Mass protests erupt in Sudan after army coup.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, that'll be bad, man. I mean, because Sudan is like
basically skeletons.
Sudan is like one of the biggest shells in the entire world, but who cares? Where are we going now? Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi invites Pope for a visit. I bet he does, because the Pope is the first non-Christian Pope, so there'll be one. And then if we move on, what else? Oh, the Bias Brainwashing Corporation telling us the first Black American world champion and his fight to the top.
What?
Which is some cyclist from 55 years ago no one's ever heard of. But, he's American and black, so long as he's black. It's a bit like, every Hollywood movie these days. So long as the star is a woman or black or a LGBTQ person or a trans woman, that's all absolutely great. And the other thing that... Sorry, carry on.
I say that in the statistics of overrepresentation of black people and Asian people, there's statistics that go as far back as 2011, and they show that there's a gross overrepresentation of these people in like TV and media and stuff. And it's actually like really bad for people's like moods and stuff. But that's kind of like a separate thing.
Well, there's also on the bias brainwashing site, what can you do to reduce emissions? And they're suggesting you get rid of your car and ride a bicycle. Because, if you do that, the fact that the UK at the moment has less than 1% of world emissions, whilst China has over 27% and is going up to about 35%, you getting rid of your car and riding a bicycle will really make a difference. Kind of like in the sense that if you were one of the extra 10 blokes who volunteered for your company on the Somme, who all got machine gunned by the Germans, you doing that would have really made a difference as you died. And we can look at like a left-wing feminist political editor from the BBC, like Laura Kunsberg. COP26, has Johnson got what it takes? Well, Johnson can make everyone in Britain hugely poorer whilst reducing the emissions into the world, even if you think they're important, by, I don't know, 0.8%. Whilst China is going from 27% to 35%. So it doesn't really matter what the fuck Johnson does. It's going to make no damn difference. And I don't understand any intelligent person who doesn't get that. I just don't understand it. I mean, I'm sorry. I try to be understanding, but I don't understand how any intelligent person can't see that if Britain's emissions today are under 1%, reducing it to zero, whilst China goes from 27 to 35%, is like, that's going backwards. So let's say Britain kept where we were now and stayed at, like, I think it's 0.9 or 0.8%. 0.9 or 0.8, 0.8 or 0.9% or 1%. So under that. And China going from 27 to 35 is going to completely destroy that. And Australia has recently said, oh no, we're going to try and go to net zero too, which is even more ridiculous because Australia is sitting on like loads of the world's energy stuff. But there's only 25 million people in Australia, even though it's a very big country geographically. And again, it's going to make no difference. Like Indonesia will vastly produce more emissions than Australia, even though Indonesia is a poor shell. India is going to do the same thing. And like both of those guys pale into insignificance compared to China. So if you're a supposedly intelligent man, like the Prime Minister of Britain or the Prime Minister of Australia, and you go along with that, you're a dimwit. And I don't believe for 1 second these people are dimwits. They're doing it on purpose. They're absolutely doing it on purpose. They are making their own people poor for no good reason, while they know very well it will actually have zero effect on anything, because the people who are the actual big emitters, if you think that's a big deal, like China, India, Indonesia, etc., those guys are not doing anything, and they never will, and they don't even have to, because the UN gives them a pass, because the UN is a left-wing corporate globalist organization. But if you say that on YouTube, your channel can get banned. Just like if you say, the China virus came from a Chinese laboratory funded by America, which it was, accidentally maybe, on purpose maybe, I don't know, probably accidentally. But that was the truth, and even Aussie admitted that, and he did a big 180 last week after he watched that video, which was a damn good video. But like, you've got to like. I sit here and I'm not the world's biggest genius, but like I can absolutely see that reducing Britain from under 1% of world emissions to nothing is going to do nothing whatsoever for the world except make most British people vastly poorer. And that's all it's going to do.
Yeah, I will say that I don't really have much to say on this because like all things that kind of started out like really huge in like 2017 and nowadays in 2021 are just so unbelievably boring and pointless that there's just no real point to engage in it online. So
So you have to tell people because not everyone knows.
of course, yeah, it's you obviously have to think about these things. You have to be really critical of them, but it gets to that kind of point. I've been, I first got political back in 2017, watching like Owen Schroyer compilations, and now I'm at the point where I just think politics is so it's just filled with so many boring people and so many boring topics, and it's just so
I see
constant.
this is where you and I differ, man. The people are not boring. They're anti the people they're supposed to be the leaders of. That's what
Well,
I think.
they can be that, but they can still be very, very droll, very, very droll.
Well, yeah, they're dull for sure, but you know, we're losing everything we ever had, man.
If only we had a charismatic leader with the people behind his back.
Yeah, I wish that too. All right, guys, we're probably gonna. I think we've probably done enough now. Anything
Oh,
you want to? Anything you want to
yeah.
shill?
Your mic went a bit robotic there.
No, I said, is there anything you want to shill?
All right. Not really. I mean, I've been working on a video for the past month or so. It's
Where's
been
my
like,
bagpipe music that you were going to give me a few weeks ago?
okay, hang on. There's, I don't know if there's a chance in my remarks. Oh, actually, hang on a minute. Right, okay. Hang on a second.
Yeah, hang on. No. I
Hang
need
on a second.
I need the actual music.
I've had this chanter
send
since
it to me on Discord, all right?
What? Oh, right, okay.
Send it to me on Discord and I'll use it. But anything you wanted to show there, man?
Yeah, I still haven't finished the video, but I will upload a video that's going to be quite long on my channel.
Cool, man.
I'll just go get a link for the channel.
Hang on. No, I'll tell you what to do here, man. Send it to me on Discord, and I'll put it in the description under the video. All right.
Right. Okay. The video, the video is response to an Irish nationalist which I met on Discord. He runs the Clan Toil website.
Okay.
And
You're not being rude or inviting violence to people.
No. Absolutely
Cool.
not. It's basically in response to a couple of things. Whether or not Ossian was actually Irish. He made the claim that people like Wellington, Roberts, etc., were Irish generals, stuff like that. He made a lot of bold claims.
The Duke of Wellington was Irish.
No, I will address that in the video, but no. That's my understanding of that. Is that he lived in Ireland, and
Of course he did.
Along the way he had some Irish ancestors. I'd say quite recent, but yeah, there wasn't that much Irish about him. He was very much an Englishman through and through.
Yeah,
and
I'm
also-
pretty. Didn't the Duke of Wellington turn around and say that just because you are born in a stable doesn't make you a horse?
Now, that is falsely attributed to him, but I think that was the Secretary of State at war at the time who said that.
Okay.
But yeah, it basically addresses a lot of pro-Irish arguments, I'd say, that I would consider to be false.
I know some pretty good Irishmen, but I don't think you'll necessarily agree with me on that one.
No, see, I've had some pretty bad experience with Irish people that I know.
Yeah, I had them shoot at me in Belfast, but I was in the British Army at the time, and they kind of used to do that, and I shot back. So yeah, but yeah, all right. I think we've done enough for one evening. Do me a favor, Napoleon. Send me your channel link. I put it up in the chat, but send me your channel link in the Discord, and I'll stick it in the description of the video, and I'll do this. I'll do the same for the other chaps who are on the stream. All right, we're gonna play ourselves out with a tune, I think. Hang on, someone's trying to get hold of me. Who? What?
Well, I have. Sorry about interrupting, but I got a keyboard the other day, and if anyone has any requests for me at a later stage, probably next week, I'll be able to play something.
Hang on, I'm just answering someone in the chat.
No, that's all right. Also, what do you have?
All right. I'm going to play us out with a tune as I always do. So here we go. Okay, so I was asked for this one from the chat, so we'll play it. Where am I? There we go.
I'm a loyal Ulster Orange man, just come across the sea. And for singing and for dancing, sure I hope that I'll please ye. I can sing or dance with any man, as I did in days of yore. And it's on the 12th I love to wear the sash my father wore.
Sure, it's all that it is beautiful, and its colors they are fine. It was born and every offering and the skill and the boy. My father wore it when I used in bygone days of yore. And it's on the 12th I love to wear the sash my father wore.
And when I go to leave yous, all good luck till yous, I'll say. And when I'm on the raging foam, I hope for me you'll pray. I'll be sailing to my native land, to Ulster's rocky shore, where on the 12th I always wear the sash my father wore.
Sure, it's all that it is beautiful, and its colors they are fine. It was worn and every offering and the skill and the boy. My father wore it when I used in bygone days of yore. And it's on the 12th I love to wear the sash my father wore.
And whenever I come back again, my brethren for to see, I hope that in good Orange style you all will welcome me. My favourite tune, Boil Water, will please me more and more, and make my orange heart feel proud of the sash my father wore.
Sure, it's all that it is beautiful, and its colors they are fine. It was worn and every offering and the skill and the boy. My father wore it when I used in bygone days of yore. And it's on the 12th I love to wear the sash my father wore.
It's fun.
There we go. I had a request for that one. So, yeah. And to Lady of Shalott, I'm glad it made you happy, because I know you've been a bit depressed lately because of all the nonsense in Victoria over the lockdowns, etc. All right, guys, that was our stream. We will be back next week with Splendid Isolation 47, I guess. If we don't do something before that, please like the stream and subscribe to the channel. Thanks to all my guests, including Napoleon, for coming on, and We'll see you soon, guys. Go on.
Cheers. Cheerio. I will do it.
Don't let the bastards grind you down.